really close to one another to look good on camera.
You do.
Because like I'm a little too close to you right now, and we're too far away on the camera. Like it's like.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Yeah, isn't that?
You really do.
Like this is what it's like to be an actor on TV.
Right. That just so uncomfortably
It's
close.
really, really weird.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so
chapter 56 is actually because I'm pretty sure we already did 55.
Because on YouTube it said the last one was off to a good start. 50 through 54. But I don't want to go back and watch that.
Well, come on.
To find out where we were.
Let me see if there's anything. I'm not finding anything in 54 that I care.
Oh no, 55. Last time I'm saying last time we did 55.
Let me see if
or 4.
I don't think I highlighted anything in 55, so
okay.
It may not
I did I highlighted that. Let's see, who is this? This would have been Mr. Bingley arrived in such a very good time that the ladies were none of them dressed. So either he was up at like really early or they slept in the way that we sleep in.
Well,
modernly.
I mean, also I suspect it strongly depends on what you mean by dressed. Like
that's true.
My pre-calc student, we meet at 9 in the morning on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. Her mom was like, "You can't meet at 9 a.m." And she's like, "Well, I won't have makeup on, but I can do pre-calc without makeup on."
Right. Makeup is not essential to pre-calc.
Right.
Okay.
So, and that's kind of my guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and then I highlighted where Kitty looks at her mom and says, "What's the matter, Mama? Why do you keep winking at me for? What am I to do?"
Like, you would just like kick her under the table. Like, I'm not even there. I don't want to kick her.
Like, look, I don't like Mrs. Bennet. I really don't like Mrs. Bennet. But in this instance, it's Kitty who's in the wrong.
Yes.
Kitty is clearly not. She's clearly. And I feel like she knows this. I feel like she knows what she's doing.
That's true.
Because it says she very innocently said. And I'm like, okay.
Okay, was that actually innocent?
If the author has said that she says it innocently, then that's
probably not.
That's meaning innocent. That she is trying to say it innocently. I think.
But failing.
Oh my gosh! And Mrs. Bennet just trying so hard. And for once, it doesn't actually cause any problems.
It's fine.
It's okay.
Like, we're all agreed on it. It's like
because everyone's there for the same purpose. Just Mrs. Bennet doesn't know it.
Right.
So she's trying too hard to get that to come to pass.
Like, I don't know if you do this at your work, but I often will go around and talk to like each of the people that are likely to actually be part of the decision, like likely to actually have an opinion on the decision. We'll get us all on the same page. And then we'll have the official meeting to make the people who feel like you need a meeting feel better about it. But we're like, all of us who might have an opinion on it are all just looking at it like, we're all on the same page, right? We're all agreed. We know what we're doing. Just don't say anything. And then there's always that one guy that just needs to like talk it over and over and over. And you're just like,
one of my old bosses would like that. He was like, okay, so let me just go over everything from the beginning to make sure I understand the whole thing.
Right.
Now, to be fair, a couple of times I was that guy, but usually when I would do that, it's because I'm like, I think that two people don't
actually
they say they're agreeing, but I don't think they're on the same page.
Right. Yeah. No, I've definitely done that.
Or when some guy thinks that something makes a whole lot of sense, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense, and I want to get him to the point where he sees the whole picture that I see.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so you go this, and then this happens, and then this happens, and because that happens, this is going to be the results. And they're like, oh wait, no, that's a bad thing.
Right.
We don't want that to happen. And I'm like, okay, so what do we do about that? And then
and then you can proceed. Yeah.
Right.
Getting people on that same page.
Whereas if people would just be okay with me looking at them and being like, no, that's not going to work.
Right.
Because of this, then we could just move on, right?
Why can't people just understand that I'm right?
Right. Come on.
Simplify life so much.
So much. Let's see. Mr. Bingley was punctual to his appointment, and he and Mr. Bennet spent the morning together as had been agreed on. The latter was much more agreeable than his companion expected.
The latter
meaning Mr. Bennet was much more agreeable than Bingley expected.
Okay.
There was nothing of presumption or folly in Bingley that could provoke his ridicule, or disgust him into silence, and he was more communicative and less eccentric than the other had ever seen him.
Well, okay.
So Mr. Bennet was behaving himself.
Only ever seen Mr. Bennet around his wife.
Right?
And his wife is ridiculous.
And his coping mechanism is being ridiculous and eccentric.
Right, but Bingley is actually, I mean, other than an utter inability to make up his mind or take a stand, he's fine.
Yeah,
right?
no, he's totally fine. He's a fairly normal person, I think.
Yeah, but caught up in the midst of all of this.
Right. And then they come back and they congratulate.
The problem with doing this together is I can't like wait until you're talking and then take a drink of water while no one can see me.
Right. Yeah. No, just drink of water.
No one will notice. That's very subtle.
You can see on the screen where you are,
Oh, no,
so you
I
can make sure you're off screen.
No one will notice this at all.
Yeah. I'll just like fill in here and let's see. Each of you so complying that nothing will ever be resolved on.
Yes.
Yes. So
I do remember that. Like, and I think he's got a point.
So easy that every servant will cheat you, and so generous that you will always exceed your income. Like it's a compliment.
Which
is sort of it is, but it's also like
it's also a little bit of a fatherly
it's like
warning.
a caution.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Mrs. Bennet like, you can't possibly exceed 4,000 a year. But actually, I know several people in this room who could do that.
I know one Mr. Wickham who could
right
easily. He could exceed that in a month.
Right.
But I like that one. Each of you are so complying that nothing will ever be resolved on. It's like whatever you want. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, but whatever. I want whatever you want. Like right. So. We should just.
Do you want to do that? Well, whatever.
Like if you want to do that,
I could go either way.
Well, yeah, but if you don't want to, it's fine. We can do that if you want.
It's like planning with the nerds. when
everyone's just so like excited to be able to geek out. We don't really care where.
Right? Yeah. No, it's like I could host this. And nobody says anything because we're discussing. I'm like, I think that N&M's going to be here this week. Mm-hmm. And Adam's like, have we decided that? I'm like, well, he posted that he'd like to host it and no one has said anything, which basically means a unanimous agreement.
Yeah. It's like no one has any evidence why that would be a great idea, but certainly no one has any complaints.
Right. Like my only concern was, can we do this?
Right. Well, and I think to a certain extent, there's the if someone says, oh, we could host it at my house, if they offer that, and I come in and say that would be a good idea, then I feel like there's reasons why I might, that by saying that's a good idea, I'm saying that other things wouldn't be a good idea.
Right. No, you're pushing too hard.
Right.
No one wants to. Everyone's like, well, I have opinions, but I don't feel strongly.
Right. Well, I want to leave it. I want to leave it open so that if someone does think it's a bad idea, they're not having to disagree with me. Yeah. No, right. They can just freely say it. No one said anything or other. Like.
Right. Which means that no one saying anything represents unanimous agreement.
Yes.
It just you have to know how to read it.
Yeah. It's difficult for us, for those who are in the group. Because we're like, I don't know, no one said anything.
No one said anything,
so we can do that.
Take that as a yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then, with Jane's engagement, Wickham and Lydia were all forgotten. Jane was beyond competition, her favorite child. Mrs. Bennet, beyond competition, her favorite child. At that moment, she cared for no other, which is how she always is. Whatever's in front of her face, that's all she knows. That's the only thing.
Because she can only hold one thing in her tiny little mind.
She's like, oh, what is that? What animal is that? Is like known for that? Is it like an insect or something? Like it just holds one? I don't know. Maybe I'm being really offensive to her.
But I'm kind of. I mean, I sympathize a lot with Mr. Bennet, who's just always like.
Yeah, I feel like
I don't mean to be really rude to her, and yet it's the only way I can tolerate being in her presence, even through this medium.
Yeah, like I feel like it must be okay to ridicule characters in a story, because it's not okay to ridicule real people, right?
Right.
But like the characters are necessarily made up, and they are like written to represent like attributes, but like especially in this book, they're written to like embody specific attributes. And Mrs. Bennet you're strictly told that she is ridiculous.
It's absurd. Yeah.
And like absurd, like that's part. The phone rang.
No. Okay, so I highlighted early in 56.
Okay.
That, you know, the horses pull up and they all look at each other like, someone's at the door.
Right.
And Bingley immediately turns to Jane and is like, you want to go for a walk? And they just like fold.
Right. They just left.
And I highlighted it and wrote in the margin, I'm like, OMG, same.
Yeah. Is there anybody important?
No, I'm just gonna see if I can turn it off.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I would appreciate that. That would be awesome. Political callers.
Freaking US.
Ugh.
Hi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
What was
we're
it?
so, okay, but here's my
Oh, so
only...
it's okay. It's okay to make fun of characters who are, you are told, stupid characters.
Right, are here for ridicule.
Right.
Like, she is, like, the related words, right? She is ridiculous. She
Right.
is here for ridicule.
Yeah.
My only concern with that, and I have the same problem with people who ship like characters that have explicitly said they're not interested in each other,
Mm-hmm.
is that we get into these stories and we get into these characters because they fill those same slots in our minds. Like,
Yeah.
in our world,
That's true.
in our way, they are real people,
Mm-hmm.
right? They have affected us as thoroughly as actual people do.
Uh-huh.
That's why it's a moving story.
Yeah.
And so you're still getting in the habit of treating people in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are like, you know, it doesn't matter, they're just characters. I'm like, yeah, but you are still forcing people into relationships that they've explicitly said they do not want.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of not okay with that.
Yeah.
And don't give me this, oh, they're fake thing. You are a fangirl. I know
Right.
for a fact you
Well,
think of these people as real people.
So for the sake of the fangirl, if you're shipping characters who said that they're not interested in each other, you have to tell the story of why they changed their mind.
Sure. Yeah,
Right.
no, I'm okay with that.
Right. I mean, I suppose you could even do it in something as simple as, you know, doorbell, I changed my mind about not wanting to be in a
Right.
relationship with you, and then tell your story of whatever you want,
Whatever,
right?
it's fine,
As long,
yeah.
I guess, as long as you,
Right, all of the ones that wake up and
Expressly
John
negate
Watson
that,
is
right.
like, okay, I actually realized that Mary was a beard, and in fact, I'm in love with you. I'm like, okay, that's a possibility. Like, I'm
Right.
not arguing that can't.
if you
Fit the
if you
data.
state that in your fan fiction, I think that's probably okay. But you're right. You're right. It is, and that's why I was asking that, because I feel a little guilty
Right.
making fun of Mrs. Bennet.
Yeah.
Like, I actually feel guilty making fun of her, and I
And-
don't, and I want to be okay with it because she's so dumb.
And it's partly
I
like,
dislike her so much.
and this, like, the mocking comes so easily to me. It's so natural. It's one of
Right.
the things
I mean,
I'm
we grew
trying.
up with it. Like, that's how you say you like somebody, is you make fun of them.
No, well,
But then it's also easy to make fun of people you don't like at the same time.
right. So have
'cause you're
good
good
luck.
at
If
it.
I make fun of you, I either really like you or I really don't like you.
Right.
Good luck figuring out which.
Yes, that
Anyway,
is why I had fewer girlfriends growing up.
fewer
Than I already had. I mean, like,
than you would have had.
fewer than I would have had if I had been raised normally to be polite to people that I like, and to, you know, be honest and be like, oh, you're cool. Do you want to hang out? Instead of, hey, your hair is like weird today. I
Right.
noticed your hair was like, you did something different with it.
Right.
All
Oh
right,
my
I'm
God.
gonna
Why am I so awkward?
go.
I'm still looking for, if anyone has one, I'm looking for a GIF to put into the, oh my God, why am I so awkward
Right.
spot that I can just reblog
Yeah.
every
Right.
day.
What is this? Okay, I looked up the word panegyric. Panegyric, a public speech or published text in praise of someone or something. Okay, and then he made a little mistake to be sure, but it is to the credit of his modesty. This naturally induced a panegyric from Jane on his diffidence and the little value he put on his own good qualities. What are they talking about?
Bingley.
Bingley, of course. Of course.
Right, no, so Mr. Bennet said something nice about Bingley, and Jane just like went off.
She's like, oh yes, absolutely.
Everything that's wonderful about Bingley. Yeah,
Yeah, I like the word panegyric though.
isn't that awesome?
If you were to give me 40 such men, I never could be so happy as you. Till I have your disposition, your goodness, I can never have your happiness.
That's legit.
That is a
and that's
legit
why we
statement about,
that's why we should not make fun of Mrs. Bennet.
because we could be happy like,
Right? Jane
like
doesn't make fun of
Jane.
Mrs. Bennet.
Right, no.
Jane looks for the best in people.
I probably would be happier if I were more like Jane.
Yeah.
And then the Bennets were speedily pronounced to be the luckiest family in the world, though only a few weeks before, when Lydia had first run away, they had been generally proved to be marked out for misfortune.
Yes.
It's like, wow, they can't catch a break, and now they're the luckiest family in the world because Jane married a guy who's worth £4,000 a year.
To be fair, everyone in the neighborhood has been chasing this guy for a year or something.
Yeah, no, yes.
So yeah. All right. So
okay.
then,
so you I don't know if I highlighted anything in this chapter. So
I highlighted tons. Anyway, so yeah, somebody was coming and Bingley and Jane are just like, out of here, and I'm like, that's exactly what I do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought when the salesman rang the door and everybody looked at each other like,
it's like, I'm not gonna get it.
Right?
I'm not gonna.
What do we do about that?
I'm like, look, it's not my house. I don't live here anymore.
I don't even care.
I'm on vacation.
So yeah, then Lady Catherine comes in with an air more than usually ungracious.
Right? More than usually.
Like, we needed to specify that, because if you just said an ungracious air, you'd be like, okay, yeah, it's Lady Catherine. No, more than usually ungracious.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be specified.
Right.
I do not have at home, which is a shame, because I cannot read you the thing about how people used to, like, when they had this great estate, to make it, like, it suddenly became popular to decorate your field and your lawns and whatever, make them all pretty and manicured and have lawns and bushes and whatever. And it was considered really picturesque to have a hermitage on your property.
Oh, I remember that.
And especially good if you could hire a hermit to live there. Yeah, so they would sign these contracts. They would be like, you can't shave and you can't cut your hair and you can't talk to anyone for 5 years. It paid pretty good money, actually.
I'm sure.
Like it paid better than what Wickham and Lydia are getting. But you were literally not allowed to talk to anybody. And I've often thought, I could do that.
Yeah.
I'm all right with that. But it's such an absurd concept of Victorian,
that's how much money these people had.
Yes.
That they could afford to hire someone to live on their property and not talk to anybody and not do anything.
Yeah. So Lady Catherine asks if she can talk to Elizabeth, and "Go, my dear," cried her mother, "and show her ladyship about the different walks. I think she will be pleased with the hermitage." They have a hermitage. Like, they never mentioned this, but they have a hermitage.
Oh my gosh.
They just have, they have a little cottage.
No, there may not be a hermit living there.
There may or may not.
I don't believe that they are wealthy enough to have a hermit living there.
Right, because Mrs. Bennet spent all that money that they would have spent on the hermit. But
yes,
they have a hermitage.
Yes.
I just feel like that needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, and then we have the conversation between Lady Catherine and Elizabeth, where I just highlighted everything Catherine or everything Elizabeth said.
I remember before they went, I highlighted there seems to be a pretty-ish kind of little wilderness on one side of your lawn.
Right.
I should be glad to take a turn in it if you will favor me with your company. I'm like, wow, pretty-ish kind of little wilderness on one side. There was one thing over there that looked like it might have been okay.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. Now, wilderness, when I think wilderness, I think like just overgrown forest, which absolutely would not have been the
not
case.
what they mean.
That's not what they mean. It's not like there's a path through like vines and trees and.
Well, no, because they talked about at Pemberley that usually the fashion for the day was to cut things into like really rigid like boxes or like dodecahedrons or like. And everything had to have square corners, and Pemberley, they, like, Darcy had the good taste to just be like, look, this is pretty. Let's leave it the way it is. Just let the woods grow. And that was one of the things that Elizabeth really liked about him.
Yeah.
He was not worried about the fashion. He was like, look, it's good. Just let it go. But you can totally see Mrs. Bennet being more of the, like, manicured, contained, perfectly rigid, because that's the fashion. Of course, obviously that's what she's going to do.
Yeah.
Except for this one little spot that they haven't done anything with. So it's also like totally Lady Catherine to look at all of this stuff that Mrs. Bennet has put so much work into making perfectly fit the fashion, and the one spot that Mrs. Bennet has not worked on, be like, yeah, that part doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, that's fairly insulting. Yeah,
she's really good at the insults.
Like just like the really really underhanded like the insult from what you don't say.
Yes, like just fantastic. So yeah, Lady Catherine accuses her of being engaged to Darcy. And although I know it must be a scandalous falsehood, I instantly resolved on setting off for this place that I might make my sentiments known to you. And Elizabeth's like, if you thought it was impossible, why are you here?
And
yeah,
I highlighted some different.
I insist on being satisfied. Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage? Your ladyship has declared it to be impossible.
I know.
Okay, but you may have made him forget what he owes to himself and to all his family. If I have, I would be the last person to confess it.
Right.
And then literally she says, Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Okay, first off, I stayed at your house for 3 weeks. I know who you are. I am aware. Also, one cannot be in your presence for like 5 minutes without finding out who you are.
Yes,
so,
that's pretty.
Yes, I am aware. Darcy's engaged to my daughter. Now what have you to say? She's like, if that's the case, you can have no reason to suppose that he might make an offer to me. Lady Catherine hesitated for a moment. I'm just like, yes, go Elizabeth. I love you. I love you.
This one is, if Mr. Darcy is neither by honor nor inclination confined to his cousin, why is he not to make another choice? And if I am that choice, why may I not accept him?
That's pretty sound logic.
I mean, it makes sense.
And she's like, your alliance will be a disgrace. Your name will never be mentioned by any of us. And then, I swear, this is the most romantic thing I have read, like, ever. Elizabeth says, but the wife of Mr. Darcy must have such extraordinary sources of happiness necessarily attached to her situation that she could, upon the whole, have no cause to repine. Like, inherent in being the wife of Mr. Darcy is so much happiness that there's nothing you can threaten me with. That is incredibly romantic.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah. And I love that when Lady Catherine, I have not been used to submit to any person's whims. I have not been in the habit of brooking disappointment. That will make your ladyship's situation at present more pitiable, but it will have no effect on me.
I'm so proud of Elizabeth, and I wish I could be so firm as she is and just be like, and how does this affect me?
And like Lady Catherine is being so like passive aggressive here, like, because the assumption is like, I have not been used to this kind of treatment. The assumption is that you should not have to endure that kind of treatment unless you're used to it. Or whatever.
And the people who are used to it do have to do it.
Yes, of course, because they deserve it. They bring it on themselves.
Right. Everyone I abuse should have to be abused because they're used to it.
They earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Is this to be endured? But it must not, shall not be. If you were sensible of your own good, you would not wish to quit the sphere in which you have been brought up. In marrying your nephew, I should not consider myself as quitting that sphere. He is a gentleman. I am a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal. According to title,
right? That's the list.
That's how it goes. There's no title difference between them.
And Lady Catherine was like, "Are you engaged?" She's like, "No." "Will you promise me never to become engaged?" "I will make no promise of the kind." "I am shocked and astonished." "Really? Have you been paying any attention at all?"
Right.
"I expected to find a more reasonable young woman." "Really? Have you been
reasonable meaning
attention
meaning agreeing with Lady Catherine.
Right, absolutely. Which is like reasonable because Elizabeth is being reasonable.
Yes.
Right. And so that you should expect to find Elizabeth actually reasonable, totally feasible.
Yeah.
That you should expect to find Elizabeth in agreement with Lady Catherine,
is kind
There's
of at
no
opposition with
evidence.
finding her reasonable.
Right? There's no evidence whatsoever you will find Elizabeth in agreement with Lady Catherine
Right.
ever on
No.
any subject. So why would you expect that at all?
Yeah. Oh gosh. And then, oh man, allow me to say, Lady Catherine, that the arguments with which you have supported this extraordinary application,
Right.
which it absolutely is,
Yes.
have been as frivolous as the application was ill-judged.
Right? Burn.
And at that point, it's like, whoa, because she is a lady,
Yes.
and Elizabeth is only a gentleman's daughter,
right.
and so that at that
That
point, it's
was
like,
pretty.
what? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, you actually don't talk to that. Like, that is a breach of
Oh no.
of class.
Yeah. No,
for
that
sure.
that was definitely. Oh no, you didn't.
Right. And then Lady Catherine goes on and she's like, you can now have nothing further to say. You have insulted me in every possible method. I must beg to return to the house.
And then she walks away. Like,
Right.
does not wait. They get to the carriage. She says, I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attention. I am most seriously displeased.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that because
I
was
wasn't
wondering,
sure.
yeah.
I really did not know where you stood on this one, Lady Catherine. I don't know where you expected to stand on it. You're just going to like come and be like, hey, look, my nephew's in love with you. Don't marry him. And have her be like, oh yeah, of course
Yeah,
not. Because you
obviously.
said, obviously. I mean, it wouldn't reflect well on you
obviously.
if I did that because I'm so inferior to you. So no, who's going to say that? He would only give me like help my position like a whole lot, right?
Right.
I'm not going to marry that. That would be awful,
And also he's awesome.
right? Elizabeth was forced to give into a little falsehood here, for to acknowledge the substance of their conversation was impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would
So
be-
yeah, and then Elizabeth, for many hours, could not think of it less than incessantly. I'm
Right.
like, that is the best description of obsession I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine going to your friend and being like, so are you over him? And she's like, I think about him less than incessantly. You're like, so you're not over him.
So you're not over him then. Okay.
Yeah.
Got just this side of it. Like every now and then you think about something else.
Right.
Got it.
Less than incessantly.
Yeah.
I really liked that one.
Well, and the thing that Miss Lady Catherine did right here is she pretty much told Elizabeth that Mr. Darcy was in love with her.
Right?
Like,
Well, she was again, because I started thinking about this. I'm like, okay, but because Lady Catherine accused her of starting the rumors.
mhm.
And we know for a fact that Elizabeth did not.
Right.
So where did the rumors come from? They didn't come from Darcy.
Yeah. Wasn't it from
Well, so
Mr. Collins?
then she starts thinking about it. So let's assume that this neighborhood is filled with empty-headed gossips.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume that those gossips have been talking about nothing all week except for the fact that Bingley and Jane are engaged.
Uh-huh.
Let's assume that they have a tendency towards exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Darcy has been also coming along to all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there can be no possible other conclusion but that he intends to propose to Elizabeth.
Right.
Obviously,
Clearly.
right?
Because it wouldn't serve gossip otherwise.
Right. In the Lizzie Bennet diaries, there's one early on where, in replacement of the scene where Mrs. Bennet is like, he's gone back to London with a party, he's bringing back a party of like 15 women. In the modern one, it turned into 500 teenage prostitutes.
Right.
And it's like, you just made that up. You just made that up.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, but let us assume that, for example,
Mm-hmm.
Lady Lucas decided that there's no other possible outcome
Mm-hmm.
than that Darcy intends to propose to me,
Right.
and said as much to her daughter,
Mm-hmm.
who happened to mention it laughingly in passing to her husband. And here we are with this whole ridiculous farce.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because yeah, Mr. Collins is not he does not get a joke
I know.
if you say something like that.
Anyway, so then she's thinking about, okay, obviously the next thing that's going to happen is Lady Catherine is going to pause on her way home to talk to Darcy about not marrying Elizabeth. And she knew not the exact degree of his affection for his aunt or his dependence on her judgment, but it was natural to suppose that he thought much higher of her ladyship than she could do, which is to say he might have some regard for her in the tiniest measure.
Right.
At all.
Right. She might have just the smallest modicum of regard for her opinion.
Right, which would be much higher than Elizabeth's opinion. So she's like, okay, she's gonna stop and talk to her, and then we'll see. Like, if he was wavering, if he was like, nah, I kind of like her, but I don't know, you connect, then Lady Catherine being like, Darcy, you have to promise me not to marry Elizabeth Bennet because of this and this and this. He might be like, okay, yeah, that's a good point. So he was scheduled to come 2 days from now. If he shows up, great. If he doesn't show up, the question about whether he's interested in me has been answered.
Yes.
So great. Now we have a resolution. One way or another, we will know.
Yes. Oh yeah, I highlighted that same line. That he thought much higher of her ladyship than she could do.
Which
yep.
Doesn't take a lot.
Nope.
Oh, and then her dad calls Lizzie into this room and is like, so I just got a letter from Mr. Collins warning us that it's very important that that you not accept a marriage proposal from Darcy. Isn't that hilarious? And Lizzie's like,
right.
Ha ha ha. Yeah.
Oh gosh. And then he's trying to make fun of like, oh, how wouldn't that be awful? Like if Mr. Darcy tried to propose to you, and she's like, yeah, it would be terrible.
Right.
That would be awful. Awful in that it's only the thing that my soul desires most in the world at the moment.
Right.
That would be, yeah. Gosh, wouldn't that be ridiculous if he liked me?
Elizabeth had never been more at a loss to make her feelings appear what they were not. It was necessary to laugh when she would have rather cried.
Right.
So, high five on the impromptu.
Yeah. Let's see.
And then, and pray, Lizzie, what said Lady Catherine about this report? Did she call to refuse her consent? Unfortunately, it was a joke, so she didn't have to, like, answer that question.
Yeah.
Like, decide how to answer that.
Let's see.
But then Darcy shows up.
Yes. Yeah. Are you? Oh, I wrote. Are you not diverted? Yes. Her father asks.
Oh, I am excessively diverted.
Yeah. Oh yes. Pray, read on.
But I also do. For what do we live but to make sport for our neighbors and laugh at them in our turn?
Yes.
I'm like, okay.
And
then he laughed. He's like, much as I abominate writing, I would not give up Mr. Collins's correspondence for any consideration.
Yeah.
He's like, this is too good. You like, he can write this kind of stuff. This is amazing. You couldn't pay for this.
It's like, this is gold. This is comedy gold.
Right? You could just
freaking fantastic.
I kind of want to write a modern AU where Mr. Bennet like is a director of reality TV shows, and all he does is just all the people around him. He just like walks up to people, is like, "Would you like a reality TV show?" And people have just come up to him and they're like begging him. They're like, "Mr. Bennet, let me be on one of your TV shows." And he's like, "Yeah, I think you'll do nicely."
I think it'll work.
I think we can make that work
out. We can find a spot for you.
Right? And he like Lizzie's his associate producer. And he's like, look at Mr. Collins. Like, you can't pay for this kind of gold.
Yeah. And let's see. Where am I?
So then Darcy does show up.
Yep.
And
which everyone's like, why is he early? Because he showed up early.
Right?
Like, he just showed up out of nowhere.
Both of them showed. Like.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they both showed up like 2 days earlier or something than they were supposed to, wasn't it? Okay. Instead of receiving any such letter of excuse from his friend as Elizabeth half expected Mr. Bingley to do, he was able to bring Darcy with him to Longbourn before many days had passed after Lady Catherine's visit.
So
So
we're
he
in the
was-
right area.
Yeah, he was expected to show up at some point. I think this was early, but
The gentleman arrived early, and before Mrs. Bennet had time to tell him of their having seen his aunt, of which her daughter sat in momentary dread, Bingley, who wanted to be alone with Jane, proposed them all walking out. And I was like, let's do that. Good call. Let's do that.
hey, let's all go for a walk.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then,
Well, I'm sure that based on what we know happened between Lady Catherine and Darcy, like
Darcy very much wants to be alone with Elizabeth.
I'm sure that, and I'm sure that Bingley knows
Yes.
that Darcy and Elizabeth
yeah.
need some time alone.
Bingley is being a wingman here.
Right.
Good wingman. Good
Right.
job.
Because
Also,
Lady Catherine didn't reveal too much about Mr. Darcy to Elizabeth, but she definitely revealed a lot about Elizabeth to Mr. Darcy.
Yes. So yeah, they go for a walk. Kitty's tagging along. They drop off Kitty at the Lucases, and like the instant they're alone. And I love this. She says, "For the sake of giving relief to my own feelings, I care not how much I may be wounding yours." And I'm like, okay, I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
Right? And then thanks him. And I really love this. He says, "You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever."
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene in Cryptonomicon where it talks about how Randy and Avi communicate in binary to
Mhm.
save on bandwidth. And so like whatever the question that you would want to be asking,
Mm-hmm.
what what the question is. And so 1 is yes, 0 is no. So in this case, like he was trying to wipe a hard drive before the feds seized it. And so like obviously the question is, did you get it wiped? And so he asks Avi's wife to take a message to Avi, and she's like, sure. And he's like, 0. She's like, what? He's like, 0. That's the message. Because we know what the question is. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing. Like Darcy's just like, look, you know what the question is.
Like
Tell me
the
the
question's
answer.
been stated.
Tell me the answer.
You gave me an answer before. Is it still?
Right? That's just answer the question.
Right. It's like in programming, you're like, look, you're a state machine. I asked you a question before. I asked you a question, or it's like a query, right?
Yeah. No, I feel like
you submitted the query. It's a cached query. The answer came back no,
right.
and then you're like, you know what? Submit that same query.
Right. I feel like you could shorten it to status question mark.
Yeah.
or state question mark.
Mhm.
State.change.
Yeah.
Call state.change.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then they then she skips the dialogue, but Elizabeth's like, yeah, no, okay.
Mm-hmm.
They have the conversation, they're gonna have to have.
Right.
And everybody's really sweet of it.
I like the Elizabeth, feeling all the more common awkwardness and anxiety of his situation, now forced herself to speak, and immediately, though not very fluently,
Yes.
gave him to understand that her sentiments had undergone so material a change since the period to which he had alluded, as to make her receive with gratitude and pleasure his present assurances. So much talking around it.
But that has been their entire relationship.
I know, it's beautiful.
It's like,
it's beautiful how well they're talking around this.
Because it's almost like there's places where the star is dead, but it's still, you can tell it's there because the planets are moving around it. Like it's not, you can't see it, and yet this data doesn't make sense unless there's something here about which everything is revolving.
Yeah.
And that's their relationship, is like this dead star that like the relationship you can't see.
Yeah.
But they're both like circling around on this mutual orbit.
Yeah. I like that immediately, though not very fluently.
Yeah. Story of my life.
Right?
I was watching YouTube, Matt and Tom's Park Bench, and Matt was trying to explain this nuclear reactor, which is orangish. And Tom's looking at him like, the word he wanted was segmented. Like Gordon,
Oh,
right?
okay.
I'm like, I really love watching these videos because I too have trouble coming up with the right words and would say orangey when I mean segmented.
It's like an orange. It's
Right?
like
Yeah,
orangey. It's
He was also trying to describe this thing with the manipulator arms, and he's like, there was this army thing.
nice.
Like that's me.
Nice.
Yeah, immediately, but not very fluently.
Yeah.
Story of my life.
Yeah. Oh, and here's where it's something her ladyship's apprehension particularly denoted her her perverseness and assurance in the belief that such relation must assist her endeavors to obtain that promise from her nephew, which she had refused to give. But unluckily for her ladyship, its effect had been exactly contrariwise.
Yes. And then I think we both highlighted, I knew enough of your disposition to be certain that had you been absolutely irrevocably decided against me, you would have acknowledged it to Lady Catherine.
Yes.
And she's like, yeah.
Yes.
That is true.
Yep.
That is a thing.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like everything comes together. Like
yeah, no, well,
this is I don't know, like this is the part where you feel really good about the story.
Yeah.
But there's less like awesome stuff to read because everything's just sort of like, oh, it's coming together and it's nice and it's like, okay, lots of good descriptions and things and that camera is going crazy. It's like flashing green.
Oh yeah, it is awkward, uncomfortable.
Huh.
Is it the wobbling of that light?
Maybe? Hopefully, like, and then I'm gonna move it down a little bit. Sorry, guys.
It's okay, no one's watching.
Right, no one watches this, so it's fine.
It's fabulous.
Let's see if this does better. Like, I think it was having problems deciding which, what the temperature of the light in the room was.
Got it. Sure.
So it would like switch back and forth based on the ratio of colors. Yeah, no, I caught it out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, what's going on? What's happening with this?
So I did highlight, when I wrote that letter, replied Darcy, I believed myself perfectly calm and cool, but I am since convinced it was written in a dreadful bitterness of spirit. And like, I know so many people like that. They're like, I am being rational. And they're like, you're really not.
Yeah. We will not quarrel for the greater share of blame annexed to that evening.
Right. Well, and yeah, no, it's so like, yes, they're perfect for each other, but also this introduction, like they're cute and lovey-dovey for like 36 to 48 hours, and then Elizabeth is like, so what made you start liking me?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was because I was mean to you. And he's like, well, I mean, like the fact that you were smart. She's like, no, it was because I was mean to you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that I mean, she's not wrong, right?
Right.
I mean, she's phrasing it in a way that sounds wrong, but she's not wrong.
Which is Elizabeth. Like,
right,
that's what she does.
Absolutely what Elizabeth is. I'm a little Elizabeth.
So yeah, then they have to go back and
yeah.
He talks about, that he gave Bingley permission to marry Jane, and like he wouldn't phrase it that way, but then he talks about what happened and he's like, yeah, you gave her Bingley permission.
So you gave him permission to marry Jane.
And Elizabeth longed to observe that Mr. Bingley had been a most delightful friend, so easily guided, his worth was invaluable.
I know.
But she checked herself. She remembered that he had not yet learned to be laughed at, and it was rather too early to begin.
Right.
And what I highlighted was just the word yet.
Right? He had yet to learn to be laughed at.
Yeah, and then they have to go home and be like, everybody, knowing that they hate each other and just like looking at each other like, yep, don't say anything. And then she tells Jane, and though suspicion was very far from Mrs. Bennet's general habits, she was like, you're joking. Like, no, obviously not. Why are you joking about this? I don't understand, Lizzie. And Lizzie's like, well, that's a wretched beginning. My sole dependence was on you. I'm sure nobody else will believe me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then she says,
this cannot be. Engaged to Mr. Darcy. You shall not deceive me. I know it to be impossible.
Right? Just like Lady Catherine.
Right.
I know how much you dislike him. And Elizabeth's like, perhaps I did not always love him as well as I do now.
Right.
Perhaps. Maybe.
Perhaps I did not. Yeah.
But I love, like, she's just unapologetically revisionist. She's like, in such cases as these, a good memory is unpardonable. It is the last time I shall ever remember it myself. We're just going to rewrite history. It's fine.
It's fine. No worries. We got this.
Unapologetically revisionist.
We got this. Just clean slate. Done.
It's all good. And
Yep.
Darcy's like, it doesn't work that way. And I was just like, totally does.
Right.
Watch. Clean slate. Gone. And he's like, no. And she's like, it's gone. Can't argue with that. See?
Look. There's the slate. It's clean.
And it's clean.
There's nothing on it.
You can't argue with the data.
You can't argue
Sorry.
with the data. Look at the data. We have nothing. There's nothing there. The data shows there's nothing.
I would actually pay good money for a scene where Elizabeth is saying this to Darcy. Like, you know, I've decided to forget that we ever met before this, and we're just starting over. And he's like, very well. Good day, Miss Bennett. My name is Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy.
Right?
Anyone wants to write that fic,
Yeah.
I will pay you.
Now I do like that approve at least of Mrs. Bennett being like, you know, oh Lizzie, do anything rather than marry without affection. Are you quite sure that you feel what you ought to do?
Yes. But on the other hand, she turned down Mr. Collins, like, so firmly.
Oh, I know.
Like,
Mrs. Bennett's like,
she's so.
and Mrs. Bennett was like, no, Mr. Collins is great. You should totally, he's a good guy.
Right.
Like, get him. You'll never get a better financial opportunity than this.
That was Miss Bennett.
You're right. It is Jane. You're right. It is Jane. Never mind.
Yeah.
Jane does have good advice.
Jane is
Mrs. Bennett
right.
is dumb. You're correct.
Let's see. Good gracious, cried Mrs. Bennett. That disagreeable Mr. Darcy is coming here again. And Elizabeth's like,
She's like, oh, I gotta.
we gotta talk about this sometime.
You're gonna pretend that you've never said that here in a couple hours.
Right. Well, then I can see why she was a little worried. Like, are you actually gonna pretend that you didn't say that, or are you actually gonna like keep being this obnoxious to my husband? I don't know.
Right. Well, and I love when she's talking with Jane again here. She's like, I must confess that I love him, Mr. Darcy, better than I do Bingley. I'm afraid that you'll be angry. And she's like, my dearest sister, now be serious. No one could love anybody more than Mr. Bingley. Like, do be serious.
Right, we all know.
I want to talk very seriously. Like I'm afraid you'll be angry because I actually like him more than your husband.
Right.
And like, come on. Stop. Look, I'm trying to be serious here. Please.
Like someone more than Mr. Bingley.
That doesn't make any sense.
Okay. I interpreted that as obviously you like your husband more than my husband. That is not the topic of conversation
Right.
here. But I really like your interpretation better.
And I think that's one of the things I like about books as opposed to like movies, is that you can get different interpretations of things like that.
You still can. Like, not going to go into that because Captain America spoilers.
Right, and I haven't seen it yet.
It's amazing.
Okay. But yeah, like and like when I was doing like Shakespeare plays in high school, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like there's so many different ways to interpret things.
Yeah.
Like the not Taming of the Shrew, Comedy of Errors. There's like Comedy of Errors or Midsummer Night's Dream or something. Like there's one of them that's like there's this character who's just like completely ridiculous. And he's got some of these lines and people are making fun of him and he like owns it, but it's like, how is he owning it? What's his attitude? And there's like 7 different major, like drastically different ways that you can read that line.
Have you seen Joss Whedon's Much Ado About Nothing?
No, I want to though.
So he has Nathan Fillion playing that character, right? Like, so he's this police officer and somebody, like the person he's arresting is like, you're an ass. And then through the rest of the play, he's like, the guy's taking notes. And he's like, so this is how we captured them and whatever. And let it be noted that I am an ass.
Yeah.
And it's like fabulous. It's exactly like you can picture Mal saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and let it be noted, I am an ass.
Right.
Yes.
It's like the sarcastic. There's like the crazy.
Right.
I'm into it. There's
Right.
the,
There's the Mrs. Bennett. Like,
right.
that's a compliment, right?
Like, oh, hey, nice.
I'm
Yeah.
an ass. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's so wonderful. Be serious. Like anyone can like Darcy better than Bingley.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so Darcy, they agree that they're going to talk to her parents tonight, and Darcy goes to talk to Mr. Bennett, and he goes like, go to your father, he wants you in the library, and she goes, and she walks in and he says, Lizzie, what are you doing?
Yeah. What?
What? Are you out of your senses? And so, yeah, they go back and forth, and finally she's like, have you any other objection other than your belief of my indifference? And he's like, no, like, that's all I want. But then I also highlighted, I know that you could be neither happy nor respectable unless you truly esteemed your husband, unless you looked up to him as a superior. Your lively talents would place you in the greatest danger of an unequal marriage. My child, let me not have the grief of seeing you unable to respect your partner in life. And there's that emphasis on you, because that's what happened to him. And he knows that Lizzie is just like him. And he's like, no, trust me. I know how miserable it is.
You know not what you are about.
I know how miserable it is to be married to someone you cannot respect.
Yeah.
And I can't. Like, I've tried. I cannot respect her. And it's terrible. And I would never, ever, ever wish that for you.
Right.
Please do
on
not
any
make
of my children, but you least of all.
But especially you, because you are just like me. And that was a little bit heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, the one thing I want to make sure is that you, Lizzie, do not end up in the situation I got myself into.
Yeah.
And so she's finally like, no, really, I've thought this through. It's been a while. And she's just sitting here like, why did I have to be so outspoken? Like, I could have just stayed quiet.
Right. I could have just been like, he's weird.
He's fine.
Right?
Whatever.
Why do I have
like
to tell everyone that I hated him
everybody
so much?
everywhere so loudly, so repeatedly.
Right. Yeah.
Why did I do that? Why did I do that?
I like later on, like he's like, if any young men come for Mary or Kitty, send them in, for I am quite at leisure. Like, bring on the men who want to marry my daughters.
And she talks about what Darcy had done for Lydia, and he goes, "Oh, excellent! I shall offer to pay him tomorrow, and he will rant and storm about his love for you, and there will be an end to the matter." Like, that is so Mr. Bennett. That is so.
Is that going to get? But that's going to get him off the hook, though.
It is. Like, that's his point. He's like, this is fantastic.
It wasn't Mr. Gardner.
So I don't have to pay him back.
So I don't have to pay him back.
Well, I mean, I would theoretically have to pay him back, but right now he is so overwhelmed with love that I'll offer, as long as I offer tomorrow.
But like, look, I heard about it and it was you. I have to pay you back. He's like, no, I love your daughter so much. It's my honor to do it. And he's
I'm
like,
off the hook.
And it's like,
that's all it takes.
All right, done. Well, I especially like the thing about if anyone comes to marry or Kitty.
Yeah.
Because he's like before he was like, you guys are never getting married. Never. Ever. You're never going to see men or do anything.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And then he's like, yeah, send him in. Send him in.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Send him in. Let's let them all get married.
Yep. And then she has to go tell her mother.
Right.
Oh, just goes on this like.
Nor was it under many minutes until she could comprehend what she heard.
I do love the picture of Mrs. Bennett just literally sitting there.
Just like. Wait, who?
What?
You're engaged to whom?
Wait, what?
Wait, who's?
I don't understand.
So, you keep talking about Mr. Darcy.
And engagement.
And you.
Can we start over?
Okay, one more time. Start from the beginning. What's going on? Are you? And you want to? I'm sorry. Did you say marry? I feel like you said marry, and that doesn't make any sense.
I'm sorry.
Like,
well, okay.
Wedding?
Marry, great. Can you explain to me how Mr. Darcy fits into this?
Right. And who are you going to marry? Someone you met through Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy introduced you to someone you want to get married to. Right, Mr. Darcy himself. What did he do?
Darcy was at Lydia's wedding. Are we talking about Lydia's wedding?
Yeah, are you talking about when Lydia got married? Because he was there. I heard you. What? And like just this whole time.
Yes. And then she goes off on this like speaking in sentence fragments.
Right.
And she's like, what will become of me? I shall go distracted. And I'm like, it's too late.
Oh, and I like this.
Way beyond that.
I like how this one ends too. She began at length to recover, to fidget about in her chair, to get up, sit down again, wonder, and bless herself. Oh, bless me. What is going on? Oh, goodness gracious. Bless me. What is happening? My daughter and Darcy. Bless me. What's happening? Like, imagine your grandmother, because that's the term, sort of the thing your grandmother would say.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, bless me. What's happening? What's going on?
No, but if I'm ever in a position to be casting Pride and Prejudice, I'm casting you as Mrs. Bennet.
Oh, the sick thing is I wouldn't turn it down. I don't think
I know.
We'll do a gender swap.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Like, I don't
Maybe
know.
not. But we could, yeah, like.
I mean, I'm torn between the gender swap
and then just like the hairspray,
and
right?
the gay Bennett couple,
right?
And just putting you in drag,
right? Yeah, like in Hairspray,
Bennett.
like it'll just be like the mom in Hairspray, the musical, always played by a man. Traditionally, like even on Broadway in the movie, it was always played by a man.
So
Yeah,
do a Hairspray. Like
Yeah.
I'm torn between these options.
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth is like, okay, good. I'll let you think that over, and goes to her room. And then like 3 minutes later, Mrs. Darcy's like, Mr. Darcy, 10,000 a year. And she's like, go away.
Oh gosh.
I just want to go to bed. I mean, on the plus side, Mr. Darcy's not here. Let's just count our blessings.
Mhm.
You just see her sitting down on the bed, like, bless me, Mr. Darcy.
Yeah.
She's like, well, okay, on the plus side, she's not going to continue hating him. Let's call that an upset.
Yeah. And then obviously Mr. Bennet, I admire all my three sons-in-law highly. Wickham perhaps is my favorite, but I shall think like I think I shall like your husband quite as well as Jane's.
To be fair, he rates his acquaintances by how absurd they are.
How entertaining they are.
Right?
to him,
Yeah. And Wickham, and I mean, he's right up there with Collins.
Yeah.
Like, it's a shame that Collins is not a son-in-law, because, my God, that
would just be
so entertaining.
Right.
But given that, like, Wickham is going to be his favorite. Like, he's going to be way more entertaining than Bingley or Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, for the first time, possibly in his life, certainly since he got married, there are sensible people in his family.
Yeah.
He could actually have a conversation
Right.
with somebody.
Uh-huh.
That'd be unusual.
Yeah.
Which actually does happen in the next, like, I think the next chapter.
Yeah.
That
The next chapter, let's see,
So, yeah.
Elizabeth and
Are-
Darcy are now actually talking about, she's teasing him about falling in love with her. Like,
He's
you like me. You love me. Because I was mean to you. Yeah.
Right? He's like, no, be sincere. Did you admire me for my impertinence? Well, for the liveliness of your mind, call it impertinence. It was
Mhm.
because I was mean to you. Let's be honest here.
Right.
And he's so serious. She's like, I mean, to be sure, you knew no actual good of me, but nobody thinks of that when they fall in love.
Right.
And he's like, was there no good in your affectionate behavior to Jane while she was ill at Netherfield? I'm like, you don't understand this game, do you? He's so serious.
Oh gosh, yeah.
How
unlucky that you should have a reasonable answer to give, and that I should be so reasonable as to admit it.
I did, like, why did you, when you called, did you look as if you did not care about me? You were grave and silent and gave me no encouragement. I was embarrassed. So was I.
Right.
It was awkward for everyone.
It was really awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did do,
Oh, and then she responded to, let's see, Darcy's letter to Lady Catherine. Sorry.
he's like, she's like, how long would you have gone on without talking if I hadn't said something? He was like, no, I came down to say something because Lady Catherine made me think there was a chance. And she's like, Lady Catherine has been of infinite use, which ought to make her happy. She loves to be of use.
Yeah. And then Elizabeth responding to Mr. Collins's letter. where he was like, you have to, you can't marry her at all, or you can't marry him. You have to refuse him. He said, I must trouble you once more for congratulations. Elizabeth will soon be the wife of Mr. Darcy. Console Lady Catherine as well as you can. But if I were you, I would stand by the nephew. He has more to give. Yours sincerely, etc.
So sarcastic. So sarcastic.
Right?
If
I were you, I would stand by the nephew.
Just throwing that out there.
Saying.
Oh, I also I want.
He has more money than James.
I want an AU where instead of writing, they actually get married and then show up at Lady Catherine's house. But I don't want it in writing because I really want an actress who can show the expression on Lady Catherine's face when they show up with a wedding ring. I want that to happen.
Yeah, just stand there like a fish for a bit, like.
And then break something.
Yeah, just walk over to a vase and be like,
yes,
I seem to have. The vase seems to have fallen off the podium. Quick, someone go get fetch a servant to clean this up right away. Something has knocked the vase off the podium. She can't handle it. She has to talk about something else. She has to make a disaster so that she can feel enraged.
But I especially love her not throwing it off in anger. She's just
and she just walks over to it and I'm thinking she doesn't know what to do with herself. She's just what's going on? And she just walks over and sees it and it's just not angry, just I have to throw this onto the ground now. This is what I have to do in order to cope with what's happening in my life.
Yes. Let's see.
Lady Catherine had been rendered so exceedingly angry by the contents of her nephew's letter that Charlotte, really rejoicing in the match, was anxious to get away till the storm was blown over.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did. You could even listen to Sir William Lucas when he when he complimented him on carrying away the brightest jewel of the country and expressed his hopes of their all meeting frequently at St. James's, with very decent composure. If he did shrug his shoulders, it was not until Sir William was out of sight. Good job.
Well done.
There was
done.
Dear Hank and John were there. Somebody was asking about I feel really bothered by people with over enthusiastic laughter. What do I do about that? And Hank and John's advice was basically, judge silently. It's better than judging loudly. That's my advice to you.
Yeah.
And Darcy did a great job with that, right?
Yes. Yeah, he did.
And then they Sir William walks away and he's just
yeah. Right. And then chapter 61 is really just wrapping everything up.
Yeah, just says how everybody reacted to all of it, right?
Right. Mr. Bingley and Jane had to get out of town because, oh my gosh, Mrs. Bennet was crazy.
Mrs. Bennet was delighted. Bingley and Jane were delighted, but they did have to leave because, oh my God, Mrs. Bennet. Kitty came to live with Jane and Elizabeth with the Bingleys and the Darcys, which made her a much better person. And they worked hard to keep her away from Lydia. Mary had to mix more with the world because Mrs. Bennet can't stand to be alone, but she didn't have to spend all this time getting everyone to compare how good looking her sisters were. So it was all right.
Yeah.
Lydia writes, it is a great comfort to have you so rich, and when you have nothing else to do, I hope you will think of us.
Right.
Elizabeth's all right, when I have nothing else to do,
I will think of you. Yeah.
Noted.
Done.
However, do not speak to Mr. Darcy about it if you would rather not. As it happened that Elizabeth had much rather not, she endeavored in her answer to put an end to every entreaty and expectation of the kind. But she did send Lydia some help when she could. Darcy did allow Lydia to come so far. Lydia stayed with the Bingleys so long that even Bingley's good humor was overcome, and he proceeded so far as to talk about giving her a hint to go away.
Yeah.
Lady Catherine was pissed.
Mhm.
She gave way to all the genuine frankness of her character
Right.
in the letter,
Georgiana really liked Elizabeth,
obviously.
and she got, kind of over her shyness, and like they got to know each other really well.
Well, and Elizabeth was really good for that. Like, Darcy was not going to help her with that.
Right. A woman may take liberties with her husband, which a brother will not always allow in a sister more than 10 years younger than himself.
Right.
So Elizabeth pushed a lot more than.
I do picture, like, she's often listened to astonishment bordering on alarm.
Right.
To the way Elizabeth talks, which, to be fair, Elizabeth is a little alarming sometimes.
That is, yes. Like how she talked to Lady Catherine earlier.
And then the Gardners visited often, and they were like, "We're so glad you brought us together by accidentally making us visit Pemberley when he was here."
Yep.
And that's the end of the book.
The end.
And I just feel like, for a book that started with, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." Like, that's such an amazing opening line.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just done now.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I wonder if it's like the style of the times or whatever, where it's like, look, and now you know all the information there is to know, done. Now you can move on to the next. Whereas like the beginning, it's like, look, here is a broad thing. And it's like, okay. And then the denouement is sort of like, and wrap, done. Whereas like she didn't try to make it into like a refrain of the beginning or anything. Like, it's like, yeah, I made my point.
I mean, and she did. It's a great book. I was
Class dismissed.
I was reading it this afternoon, and I had forgotten how much I love the ending of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, from the moment Lady Catherine arrives to the end, I'm just like, this is amazing.
Oh my gosh. No, I was on the train in Tokyo reading the end of this book, and I'm just like I was like, oh snap, that's like what?
Right?
What? You said what to Lady Catherine?
Yes.
Like, what dog? You got what? And like I had to keep myself from like getting too excited on the train with like all these people who are like already think I'm weird because I'm white, and then.
Right. I mean, on the plus side, like, you're gaijin, you can't get any weirder than that.
I really can't.
Right?
Like, it would just reinforce the stereotype, which
Right.
is.
So, I mean, yeah, you're allowed to be super excited about stuff
Right.
like that. But yeah, well, and then they're like talking about it, and he's like, I'm sorry, I was really error. She's like, no, I totally prejudged you. It wasn't fair. And he's like, well, no, but you had some legitimate points. She's like, well, yeah, but I was also really harsh about it. And they're like, I'm just that whole conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
It's
cute.
I kind of dig people talking, like having a relationship in which they sit down and they talk through the things that were causing problems in the relationship, and they arrive at a mutual agreement that meets both parties' needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I dig that.
Yeah.
I dig that.
Cool. Done.
That's
15
insane.
episodes.
Now what?
I don't know. I'm not reading Moby Dick. I'm not reading Moby Dick.
How about Les Miserables?
That one's gonna be a lot. It's like a 2-year project.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, we could do Jekyll and Hyde. That would be like a 2-episode project.
Yeah. I read Jekyll and Hyde. I liked that one. We could try The Portrait of Dorian Gray.
I've never read that.
I started reading it. I was really bored.
Okay.
I found it really boring, but I don't know.
Maybe there's cool stuff there.
Like, I don't know where it goes. That's the thing, is I don't know the story.
Oh, really?
I mean, I know the premise of, like, the painting gets older and he doesn't, but like, as far as I'd gotten to, like, there was maybe someone's coming to paint him, and I was like halfway through the book.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, what
do we do?
And there was something about like an actress that he was maybe having an affair with, and that's it. That's like all I know. And I'm like, I really don't know what the conflict becomes in the actual story. I've got ideas of what the conflict could be in that premise.
And if that's not where it turns out to be, we'll write fanfic.
Right. We'll clearly other people have.
Really?
Like they have with Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Everything everybody knows about Frankenstein is fanfic.
Well, okay.
Unless you've read the book.
I'm gonna say.
Or studied it, right?
My particular group of friends, Like,
They probably.
actually, okay, here's the most common thing that goes on in my group of friends is intelligence is knowing Frankenstein is not the monster.
Right.
Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster.
Yes.
That is the most common thing that's discussed about Frankenstein in my circles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
No, because Frankenstein is not the name of the monster. It's the name of the guy who made the monster.
right. Who is honestly
And
the monster.
Well, and even in the book, though, he's not like a bad person. He's a person who made like some really naive choices.
So yeah, no, I was
And then has to live with the awful, terrible consequences. Like that's the horror of that book, is that he in his youth, he naively made some decisions, which kind of were understandable. And then something awful happened from that, and he has to make some really awful decisions around that.
I mean, there's this big argument on Tumblr about how Frankenstein was about, men who think they're so much better than everyone else that they make these decisions without considering the consequences. And it's almost like Mary Shelley had someone like that in her life. And somebody else was like, you leave Lord Byron out of this.
Nice. Nice.
I mean, we could do a Shakespeare.
I kind of want to do Dorian Gray because that's sort of like my speaking of
It's what you're hung up on.
Well, yeah, speaking of Moby Dick, like that's my white whale, right?
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant. Literary references on books we haven't read.
right. So I could be all right with that. We do Dorian Gray.
Yeah.
We'll have to find that one
It's
and then
on-
schedule a
it's on
time to do
Gutenberg,
that.
I'm sure.
Everything's on Gutenberg. Everything that you studied in school, probably.
Well, I mean, everything we're doing here, like,
Yeah.
I feel like part of the point of this is specifically, also, we're in the mode of reading Victorian literature. And I feel like once you've gotten used to translating from
Mhm.
Victorian English to modern English, you should just keep reading Victorian literature.
Right.
Because you've got the hang of it now. Let's just blast through it.
But depending on how Dorian Gray goes, I might want to go back to Jane Austen. We'll read like Sense and Sensibility or something.
Because I was talking to one of my friends about Emma. And I'm like, I don't. And she's like, well, the thing you have to know about Emma is that it's kind of from like Lydia's perspective. And I'm like, I don't think I can do that.
Interesting.
Can you get me into the Wi-Fi?
I can, but I'm not going to do it on the.
You're not gonna
I'm not going to broadcast
this
the.
Wi-Fi code to the entire internet. No one's watching.
Right. It's a long password.
Yeah.
And he's
Good.
kind of like.
Security. Security's good. I am in favor of security.
Should get you on.
We'll find out.
Okay. And I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Sounds good.
So bye everyone who's not watching.